Hey, it's Sam, and I'm talking about planets in Bharani Nakshatra. Currently, in here in April 26, 2020, we have a few planets in Bharani Nakshatra. I'm sorry, 2021. We have planets in Bharani Nakshatra, and I'm going to be talking about them today, as well as the nature of planets in nakshatras and whatnot. So check this out. So as you see, I have a chart here. This is the chart that we're looking at here. This is April 27th, 2021. You see, there's a couple planets here in Bharani Nakshatra, and on the 27th, which is tomorrow, as I'm recording this on the 26th, we'll have some planets in Bharani that'll be Sun, Venus, and Mercury. And I thought it'd be a good chance to talk about this nakshatra, Bharani, and also talk about nakshatras in general. You may have noticed recently I've been talking about this course, or this group of courses that I have called Vedic Astrology Essentials, which is a group of two classes that you can get less than $10, and you get 10 hours worth of classes. One is called Yoga, Ayurveda, and Vedic Astrology, which is a really powerful course. 6 hours of that. Then you get one on quantum Vedic astrology, neuroscience, the three brains, and then you get one on spiritual Vedic astrology. And actually, in it, I talk about all the nakshatras and how to look at planets in nakshatras and how these planets in the nakshatras influence our relationship with astrology and with the zodiac and whatnot. Of course, Indian astrology is completely pinned to the sidereal zodiac. That's not anything that's even up for debate. It's in every one of the texts, and every one of the texts say that Aries and Ashwini are at the beginning of the zodiac. Again, it's not a debatable point. And in every situation, even the non-astrology texts, even in the astronomy books, they show you that you locate planets in the sky based on the nakshatras, and also none of this is controversial in any way. But what winds up happening is once you do that, then you set up this very consistent nakshatra scheme that starts with Ashwini, then the next nakshatra is Bharani, then you have Kritika between Aries and Taurus, then you have Rohini, then Mrigashira between Taurus and Gemini, then Ardra, then Punarvasu between Gemini and Cancer, etc. So it sets that up, boom, it just snaps that whole structure into place. And of course, so when the Sun, Mercury, and Venus are traveling around the zodiac together, they often pile up in the same nakshatra. Like we see right now, Bharani Nakshatra is being jammed up with these three planets. And again, because the Sun, Mercury, and Venus often aren't that far from each other, it's not that unusual to get them this close together. But astronomically, it's also interesting to know that when you get the planets like this, Mercury and Venus are actually behind the Sun. They're what's called combust. And Mercury's going to be retrograde soon. So there's a lot going on. But I want to talk about the nakshatra of Bharani because it's literally the nakshatra that comes after Ashwini, and it is in Aries. Again, this is not any sort of debatable point. It's the second nakshatra in Aries, where Ashwini is the beginning of the zodiac, which initiates that excited, headlong journey into life. Like you're born, and here you are. You're supposed to be living your life full on, like those two horses, like the twin horses of Ashwini, right? And so the next section of the zodiac after that is Bharani, which shows the need to like kind of be more restrained, be more aware of the consequences, and to have to bear the result of your actions. And it's actually from the same word, Bharani. Bharani is from the same English word that means to bear, right? To like bear the results of your actions. And the symbol is the female the female reproductive organs, the uterus and the womb, and the things that create life, right? Women literally have to bear children, childbearing. We even use the word, right? And again, what happens is you rush into something and you create something with that energy. So, the way that I use this is, it's not really sexual, but it has that sort of connotation, is that our energy and our will sort of penetrates existence and life. And you can see this in the nature of Ashwini, which is those two horses kind of, literally like penetrating existence with this energy. Think of that in a sexual way too, a sort of penetration and a sexual act, which then you create something with that. So whatever it is that you're trying to do and you're trying to accomplish, you're going to create some form with it. It might be a baby, which is literally what the female reproductive system is evoking, but it might be something else. It might be your will to, like, I want to do this thing and I want to do that thing, and so, but then once you create something, you have to bear it. You have to bear the burden of that, bear the weight of that, bear the pressure of that. And it's like a burden to bear. But again, it doesn't mean it's bad. Burdens aren't necessarily bad. We're all here trying to find the burden that's worth bearing, right? Every woman not every woman, but almost every woman and mother who's had a child says, it was worth bearing the child, and often they want to have another child. And when they're bearing a child, they feel that, that sort of a sense of purpose of bearing the weight and bearing, even though it's not easy and it's difficult. And then childbirth, you got to push the baby out and all of that. That's a burden worth bearing, right? Some of us don't have kids or didn't approach that, and we find other burdens worth bearing, right? Like you look at a great artist or an athlete or someone who sacrifices and works hard. It's for something that we love, right? Just like the mother who will happily bear the burden of the child because she loves the child. She loves to raise the child and wants to bring life. Like with me, the burden that I bear is my work, right? And I work hard at it, but I love doing it, and I don't mind bearing the burden of it. And so this is the nature of Bharani Nakshatra, and again, it comes in Aries to show that sort of it can be difficult and even sort of diabolical if we wind up having to bear something that we don't want to bear, or if the price is too high and we don't have a good equation or a good relationship with our own values, right? With our own non-starter issues. Like there's certain things, like let's say like a relationship, which is a good one. That's always a good place to start because that's where our boundaries and these choices show up. And of course, with the nakshatra of Bharani, with those sort of sexual connotations, especially with the female reproductive organs, it's a good symbol, because in relationships, we have to bear a certain amount of suffering in order to have the connection. And over time, we're always evaluating, is it worth bearing this difficulty in order to continue with the connection and the thing that I want? I want the good thing, which is the sweetness and the love and even literally like the sex, but is it worth it, what I have to do to keep getting it or whatever? And over time, we're always reevaluating that. Even in our life in general, even in your life with the things that you have, you're always saying, is this worth still bearing? Or do I need to get rid of this and start bearing something else, right? Is that price high enough? Or is the price to pay too high? And so again, these are all things related to Aries as well, because Aries is where we're like, okay, this is too much now. Let me get rid of it. Now I need to get rid of this thing and invite in new energy, invite in a new kind of enthusiasm, which is Ashwini leading to Bharani, Ashwini leading to Bharani is, now there's some new kind of energy and enthusiasm that I need to call in and start to bear that. Like, for example, before I was bearing astrology, before I was willing to carry that burden, there were other burdens that I was, at least for a time, willing to bear. Talked before about, how I was a musician and I would play music and write songs and do these other things. And, that was a great love and something that I was willing to bear. And literally even things like, spending money for equipment and all that stuff, And as I was actually, transitioning into my life as an astrologer or, as a yoga teacher and whatnot, I was filtering through these things. I was like, slowly over time, I started to, sell some of my equipment. I used to have an upright bass. It's called a double bass. Big upright acoustic bass sitting in my little apartment in San Francisco. It was packed with music equipment and a project studio and speaker, a bunch of instruments. One of them was a big stand-up bass, which I hardly had room for. I remember one of the first things that I did is I sold the stand-up bass, sold the string bass, started making room for other things, making room to give birth to other things. So that, that's a sort of process of kind of weeding through things. By the way, I realized before I went on that I have this. Look at this. This is my oven mitt, and it's a bear. Look, isn't that cool? This is my Bharani. I'm sorry. Anyway, isn't that cool? That's my oven mitt. And it happened to be sitting next to me when I started. I was like, okay, whatever. Okay, that's not really related to anything, but so we're always assessing whether or not something is worth bearing a child, or giving birth to something. And what happens is if we keep bearing things for too long and they've worn out their welcome, then we start to resent having to bear them anymore. We start resenting the people that are represented by the things we have to bear. We have to, those things we have to bear. Isn't that cool? I think I'll wear this for every video now. What do you think? This will be my new gimmick. And we start to resent the people if we're not careful. See, this is where you also see things like the debilitated planets and the exalted planets and the planets that do well in certain signs, right? Aries is a sign of decisiveness, certainty. And when things, again, like when they wear out their welcome, when it's time to move away from something, Aries will do it. Boom, let me go, right? By the way, Venus and Mercury are it's a little tricky here, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But first, I want to get more, a little more into Bharani, and then I'll talk about Venus and Mercury specifically. But the Sun is actually, obviously, it's quite good in Aries because we're going about our business and our vision and our purpose, and all of that is what's important, right? And so Ashwini is there, and we're charging through like, okay, this is the thing, and then it moves into Bharani, which again, the Sun is about to move into Bharani, as you see, on the 27th. So then the Sun will be in Bharani for 13 days, right? So the Sun will then be in Bharani for 13 days. And then Bharani, when the Sun goes there, then it's evaluating, are these things that I've been charging into for the last 13 days, because it's 1320, the last 13 days, the Sun will say, is this worth bearing? Is it worth bearing the responsibility of these things that started since the Sun was in Ashwini and in Aries? And if it's not, the Sun will cut it out, because that's what the Sun does. It says, is it taking me where I'm going? If it is, it's like, great. Now I'm willing to bear the responsibility of this thing. If it's not, it's like, that wasn't it. And we'll, maybe double down on the things that are worth bearing, etc. So this is why the Sun is powerful there. Mars is powerful in Aries. Of course, Mars, the same tendency. Jupiter's the same thing. Is this inspiring me? Again, in Aries, we're acting on things. I'm taking action on it. We're supposed to take action on the things that inspire us, Jupiter. Obviously, Mars acting on the things where we're disciplined, so that we're feeling strong and powerful, right? You think of, again, planet that's debilitated in botany. Probably the weakest planet there is Saturn, because again, now Saturn is a planet doesn't like to let go of things. Saturn wants to hang on to things. When Saturn is powerful, for example, we have a good relationship with time. A good relationship with time isn't just some abstract, I'm on time, I show up on time. That's part of it. A person has a powerful Saturn, they're usually prompt, they're on time, they're aware of time. But more than that, it's about our relationship with time and things in our life and being willing to let go of them when it's time to let go of them. This thing is finished. Let it go and move on to something else. When you get Saturn, for example, in botany, again, this isn't a pro forma thing, but this is an archetype of why Saturn has a difficult time in botany. So we can learn something about botany and something about Saturn. But instead of letting go of things, we'll hang on, and then we'll start to get resentful. Well, there'll be resentments and things will build up, because this is what Saturn does. If we don't let go of things in time, we'll start to have resentments. We'll start to accumulate, remembering the past, remembering all the pain that was caused. This is what Saturn does anyway. Saturn's a part of us that remembers the pain of what people did to us or the things that happened. And we need to learn how to live gracefully with time and the past and the future. Again, so powerful Saturn, we can see those things in context and realize, okay, that was this. Find compassion maybe for those who hurt us and sort of move on. To some extent, that's a powerful Saturn. Again, when it's Aries, first of all, Saturn is much more individualized and takes all that much more personally. Oh, and again, Aries is competitive and wanting to fight over it and battle over it. But again, Saturn might feel weak and not feel able to fight. Might feel burdened by the guilt or the fear of losing or all kinds of stuff, which makes Saturn not so comfortable in Aries. Right? Again, it's comfortable in Libra, where there's more service, there's more empathy, there's more reaching out to other people. There's not this embarrassment at all of our pain. Again, Saturn's where we feel embarrassed, nervous, ashamed, guilty. All these, again, things that could be very toxic. We all feel them, and they can be very creative, catalyst for something, especially empathy and compassion, if we can handle them well. If not, we get burdened by them. And again, in botany, especially because the god is Yama, who is the god of punishment. See, this is a thing where this is why Saturn is very much related to things like punishment. Like, oh, you did this to me, now I'm going to do this to you. And that's sort of punishment. This is one of the qualities of Bharani Nakshatra that needs to be understood. Is like moon in botany can be difficult for this way. Mercury, Venus as well, because of this quality of botany which is related to Yama and the consequences of our actions. And again, a theme of what can feel like punishment, but it especially in the negative if we don't understand it very well. Like, for example, what I was just telling you about. When we find burdens that are worth bearing, it doesn't feel like we're being punished, or we don't feel like we're being abused when we have to show up and work hard. The mother doesn't feel like she's being punished because she has to bear her child, right? That doesn't feel like punishment. She loves the child. She's happy, bearing that burden. I don't feel like I'm being punished because I have to do things for my work that I love or, whatever. But if I have to do something that I don't love and I have to keep doing it over and over again, it kind of feels like a sort of punishment. Like, why is everything so hard? Right? And and there's resentments that build up because we have to do that thing. So this is a quality of Bharani Nakshatra, and this is the thing that makes us stay in line with our vision. Again, it's also why the sun is exalted, because the sun is not going to sit there and let himself be punished or feel punished. The sun isn't a victim. Again, Saturn has a real victim mentality. Oh, this happened to me. Oh, I'm being punished. And then the flip side is that if I ever get power, I'm going to punish you now. You punish me, now I punish you, right? This kind of, it can kind of get twisted, right? Whereas the sun, Mars, Jupiter, they don't have that sort of quality, right? You can see also with the moon, why the moon in Bharani can get a little tricky, because again, the moon is also where we're very sensitive and we can tend to feel like we're being punished at times for things, right? So there's a quality of this sort of punishment in Bharani Nakshatra that we always need to be aware of when planets go through Bharani, not to punish others, not to not to feel like a victim, and realize that everything that we've had to bear, it's because we've been in it. We've been wanting that thing. I wanted something from this, so I was willing to bear this, particularly things that you've been involved in, like if it was a job or a relationship or something where you kept going back. If after all that you feel like you've been punished or abused or mistreated or whatever, again, I know there are some situations where those things really happen, but if we also can get out of them really quick. Most of the time people can't abuse us for a long time unless we let them. People try to abuse me, it's not gonna last very long. I'm gonna get the hell out of there, right? So again, we keep going, we have to learn another lesson in that situation. So this is why also Mercury and Venus can have this kind of tricky relationship with this quality of Bharani Nakshatra, because they're gentle planets. You see the planets I mentioned, Mercury, Venus, Moon, they're all sort of gentle planets. Mercury and Venus are Rajasic, trying to be happy and interact with other people. Again, Aries is very individualized, and Bharani is where individuals also have to do things that are hard, set boundaries, set limits, say no. Again, this is very much Yama and Bharani energy. No, I'm done with this now. It's over. Again, that's the sun in a very powerful way saying no. Saying in a very powerful way, no, this thing is over. I'm moving on to something else. Saturn might wind up saying no, like, no, now I'm cutting you out, doing this, and blah, 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 and it's a whole different kind of no, because Saturn is debilitated there, right? For example, Mercury and Venus have a similar kind of thing. Mercury and Venus maybe have wanted to connect, but we feel mistreated or whatever. We can feel kind of overcome by the intensity of Bharani, and certain kinds of resentments can show up. So look in your chart. If you do have planets there, look and see how, your relationship to Yama. It's heavy. It's the god of death. Ooh, it's not serious stuff. And death meaning like the seriousness, the heaviness, and how that might feel like punishment and a challenge to your innocence, right? To where you're like, I didn't do anything, and yet everything was so mean, right? It's like those other planets, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, they don't have time. They're not going to sit there and cry about those things. But those planets that are more gentle, more emotional, can get into a difficult place there. So, we have this, so we have these planets now going through Bharani, very, very interesting nakshatra, and particularly when you remember, and especially again to really sort of, double down, triple down on this way the Zodiac is laid out. The sensible architecture of the Zodiac is just beautiful. One of the things that I do, and I've done in all my nakshatra courses or whatever, is I track every nakshatra, how one leads to the next. How Aries starts with Ashwini and then Bharani again, and then Bharani, that energy of Bharani leads to Kritika, taking that control and then bringing that mastery into the next sign of Taurus, where we learn how to manage and to control the fire and the Agni, and then that leads to Rohini, and that leads to Mrgashira and Ardra, and it's a whole story. The Zodiac is a mandala of nakshatras and rashis and Zodiac signs. So it's a whole mandala of energy. And like I say, there is if you did want to learn more about these things, there's the this Vedic Astrology Essentials special here, where you could get some classes, only $10 for like 10 hours of classes on yoga, Ayurveda, Vedic astrology. People listen to me talk about these things all the time and are like, oh, it's so amazing, yada, yada, yada. And yet, these principles that underpin all of the things I'm saying, again, you could, if you don't understand these things, you could learn so much for like $10. Learn all about the Vedic frameworks, all the things that I'm talking about in a general sense with the elements and the gunas of the planets and the signs and the houses. You can also learn the quantum Vedic astrology, the neuroscience, how these Eastern sciences are really connected to Indian sciences. And then also learn how, again, in this case, I'm talking about it on this level with all these nakshatras. Again, I talk about all of these different sections of the sky and what the real energy is behind these things. Bharani Nakshatra, again, that quality of Lord Yama, who feels that sort of restraint and it feels heavy. But we have to be. But if we're willing to do it, and we really love it, then it brings a lot of discipline. Again, that's a big quality of Aries, because Ashwini can be undisciplined. It can be running all over the place. It can be like, okay, bam, now I'm trying a lot of things. Whereas Bharani goes, whoosh, okay, let's take that energy and make it something creative. Again, the symbol is the female reproductive track, and the god is Yama, which means restraint. Restrain those horses. We even do things like, the way we restrain horses. We actually, tie we like yoke them together to get them pulling in the same direction. So we even see how Ashwini and the twin horses then lead to something like the restraint, needing to restrain all of that energy so that those horses are pulling in the same direction, and we're really concentrated and disciplined in our energy. So again, we're all looking for that thing, that burden that we're willing to bear, right? And once we find that burden that we're willing to bear, then we show up for it, and we're able to then, not shrink from our duties and responsibilities. I just taught a weekend course on Swadharma and career. A lot of it revolves around this kind of thing. What's your, one of my favorite musicians, Geddy Lee, the bass player of Rush, did a solo record, and it was called My Favorite Headache. That's what he called the album, My Favorite Headache. And it's really kind of like the headache that we're willing to have, right? So again, it's all about bearing it and being willing to bear what you're working towards. And right now, again, we have Sun, Mercury, Venus there. And so if you have planets there in your natal chart, be careful not to be punishing, not to feel like you've been punished or people are punishing you or you're a victim, or all this kind of heavy language can come out when people have planets in Bharani. Again, Saturn's debilitated there, so you can really see why Saturn can be, that's an extreme. It's not always like that, but it can be. And by the way, even people that have Saturn in Bharani, it's not like if you have that, that's always going to happen or whatever. I use these to illustrate the principles, and it does show the principles. But again, it's mainly to, even in a general sense, we can all feel that kind of perhaps feeling like a victim or feeling this way when we get this, when we get planets piling up there. Rather than just let it be this negative psychological impulse, understand the depth behind it and why that's that same instinct and that same impulse, if it's the sun or Jupiter or Mars, rather than having it be something that feels like a burden, it feels like a great structure that allows us to focus our creativity and our energy, and that reveals the thing that we're willing to bear.